Welcome to Gaslight, Gatekeep, Gay Angel, a supernatural retrospective podcast. I'm your host, Samantha, and before we jump into things, I want to explain how this podcast is going to work. Essentially, I'm going to be rewatching my favorite show, Supernatural, taking notes, and then walking you through both the episode itself and my thoughts on it. I'm going to try and keep things contained to just what happens in the episode we're discussing and not give context that I know about as someone who's been watching since 2005. So, for example, if Dean says something in the pilot that I know has implications all the way in season 8, I'm not going to tell you. I'm going into this as if you've never seen Supernatural, and it's my job to explain all of it to you. Also, I want to make it clear up front that this is literally my favorite show. Anything I bitch about in this podcast is coming from a place of love. It's the kind of love you have for your kid when they're in that phase where they keep kicking you in the shins all the time and asking you why after everything you say, but it's love nevertheless. I will pick this show apart to shreds, but that's because it's my favorite and I wish it was a better show. Now that we've established how this is going to work, let's get started with Supernatural Season 1, Episode 1, Pilot. This pilot is one of the most jam-packed episodes of TV that Supernatural will ever produce in its 327-episode run. There is so much information thrown at you in 40 minutes that you need to remember to understand the rest of the show. Most shows try to ease you into things, introduce a few characters here and there, but Supernatural throws you in the deep end and expects you not to drown. It's kind of the worst, but it's something you have to get used to tolerate this show at all. The episode opens on the night of November 2nd, 1983. Dean is 4 years old and Sam is 6 months old. The family is saying goodnight to Sam, tucking him into bed, and Mary Winchester, Sam and Dean's mother, is putting Sam into his crib. We see a picture on Sam's dresser of a happy, younger John and Mary, which establishes to us, the audience, that they are, for all intents and purposes, a happy, normal family. John even asks Dean if he thinks Sam is finally old enough to throw around a football. Mind you, Sam is 6 months old, so it's gonna be a no, John. We then cut to Mary waking up because the baby monitor for Sam is going off. There's this loud static sound coming through it. She gets up and goes to investigate like a good mom would, and she sees a man standing over Sam's crib. She assumes this man is John and that he's taking care of whatever's going on, so she leaves the room and then she notices the lights are flickering. She doesn't seem to think much of this past him, that's kind of weird, but she goes downstairs anyways. This is when she sees that John has passed out in his lazy boy in front of the TV, and it hits her that holy shit, that guy standing over my son's crib, yeah, that's not my husband, that is a stranger. She runs upstairs, and once she gets up to Sam's room, we cut to John, who hears her scream, and he runs after her. Good job, John, you did one good thing for once in your life. He gets to Sam's room and she's not there. For whatever reason, he doesn't freak out and go chasing after her, he just goes and checks on Sam, okay? As he's patting Sam's head, blood drops on his hand, and this is when it's revealed that Mary is in the room. She did not leave. She is pinned to the ceiling, gutted. And as John is watching his wife in horror, she bursts into flames, and then within like 5 seconds, the whole room goes up. John grabs Sam out of his crib, hands him to Dean, and tells him, get him out of the house. We cut to them sitting outside. John is holding Sam and sitting with Dean, and the fire department is working to put out the fire. Obviously, John is pissed. He doesn't understand who did this to his wife. He doesn't know why someone would do this to his wife. And this is the catalyst for the entire plot of this show. This cold open establishes many things about this show, but the thing I want to bring attention to is this is when we first see Dean come responsible for Sam. Dean is 4 years old, and this is the beginning of him being parentified. This never goes away. Dean was 4 years old when his mother died and was made to feel like he had to keep his brother safe, and he has carried that burden until present day, which in this episode is 2005, when he's 26 years old. This feeling of responsibility for Sam is central to Dean's character, and it is what drives him for basically the entire show, and eventually this feeling of responsibility carries over from not just his little brother, but to the entire world. Dean is just a small child. He's 4, and he's already being burdened with so much, and that has an incredible impact on his character throughout the run of the show. This parentification and thrusting of responsibility for Sam upon Dean is something that will continue to piss me off for the next 15 years and is something you will hear me rant about in nearly every episode of this podcast. I'm warning you now, I am the #1 Dean defender, and I hate that this was done to him, and you will hear about it again and again and again in this podcast. Anyways, after the title card rolls, We cut to Stanford and we are introduced to 22-year-old Sam Winchester. Sam is at Stanford and we meet his girlfriend Jess alongside him. We don't see her for very long, but I love Jess. I am a ride or die for Jess. Jess is for Jess. Jess is trying to get Sam to come along with her to a Halloween party. He doesn't want to go, but eventually she convinces him, hey, we're gonna have fun. Just come with me to the party. You need a break. We get to the party, and while they're at the party, Jess, Sam, and his friend are talking about how he just took his LSAT and he got a 174. Look, I've thought about going to law school. I have a degree in criminal justice. This is a patently insane LSAT score for someone who was raised driving around the country, killing monsters, and assuredly got into Stanford with forged documents. I'm not saying Sam is stupid, but a 174 is what Elle Woods got on her fucking LSAT. That's a crazy score. But this is meant to establish that Sam is smart, so we'll roll with it. They go home after the Halloween party, and Sam, he's passed out. He's tired from the party, and then he's woken up by a crash in his apartment. He gets out of bed, goes to investigate, and sees that a man is in their apartment. Sam snaps back into his hunting instincts from his childhood, pins him down, and it is revealed that this man is none other than his big brother, Dean Winchester. Dean is all grown up and he has broken into his little brother's apartment. Dean ribs Sam about being out of practice, even though he was able to pin him to the ground. And it's established for us by him saying this that Sam used to fight and hunt with him, but he hasn't been doing that for a while now. Jess pops up because she's been woken up by all of the ruckus in her apartment, and she is immediately hit on by Dean because in the early seasons, Dean hits on anything that moves, that has boobs attached to it. He is not the best. I love Dean dearly, but he was written terribly. This is something that I will bitch about a lot on this podcast because I don't believe this is who Dean truly is. I think this is a version of himself that he had to become to protect himself from John and fit in the world of hunting. I don't think that this chauvinistic, I love beer, women, and porn dude is the real Dean Winchester. I think he is much different than that. Anyways, Dean is here to tell Sam that Dad's on a hunting trip and he hasn't been home in a few days. Clearly, this is meant to mean that something has gone wrong with the monster hunting. Jess is like, okay, what? But Sam knows what Dean means, and he realizes that Dean is asking him, come with me, come find our dad, but he doesn't want to go. Sam swore that he was done with hunting forever, and he is sticking to his guns for about the next 5 minutes. This scene of Dean trying to get Sam to come back to hunting and to come find their dad with him gives us a lot of insight about the kind of childhood Sam and Dean had. Sam talks about how when he was 9 years old, he told John that he was afraid of the monster in his closet, and he gave him a 45 instead of telling him monsters aren't real. They had to go through weapons training, they were melting silver into bullets, they were raised like warriors, stuff like that. It's sad. It's really sad. I see where Sam is coming from, and he's right. They should not have been forced to live like that as children. It's ridiculous. In Sam's eyes, their father was an obsessive who only cared about finding the thing that killed their mom, not about Sam and Dean. And he's right. He was an obsessive, and that is the only thing he cared about. We also get the vibe that Dean resents Sam for running away and leaving him alone with John. To me, this resentment points to nothing but abuse. It's clear to me that Dean is thinking, why did you leave me alone with the man who abused the both of us? How is it fair that you get to have this nice life and I don't? But Sam is thinking, hey, John told me if I was going, stay gone. So I did. And I really can't fault him for that. Moving on from this discussion, we get introduced to the monster of the week for this episode. Dean tells Sam that Dad was working on a 2-lane blacktop in Jericho, California, where over the last 20 years, 10 men have gone missing from the same 5-mile stretch of road. All Dean has from John is a voicemail warning them about the case, and there's an EVP on the voicemail saying, I can never go home in a woman's voice. This will make sense later. At this point, Dean is just trying to convince Sam, hey, you need to come with me. You need to help me find our father. So he tells Sam, hey, I left you alone for 2 years when you asked me to. And this finally breaks Sam down, and he agrees to go with Dean to find their dad up in Jericho, as long as he can be back home by Monday morning for his law school interview with Stanford. Clearly, Dean thinks this is a waste of time, but he knows that he has to say yes to get Sam to come with him, so he says fine, and they hit the road. Personally, my life would have been much easier for the last 18 years if Sam had just said, no, fuck off, I'm going back inside. But then there'd be no show, so off we go to Jericho, California. We then cut to seeing the first victim of this week's Monster of the Week, and he is on the phone with his girlfriend while he's driving down the highway, and he sees a woman in white along the road and stops to help her. She asks him, "Can you take me home?" and he immediately agrees. Maybe that wasn't the best idea, and maybe this man is a scumbag who is clearly thinking of cheating on his girlfriend with this beautiful woman, but who's to say? So far, all he's done is he's given a nice lady a ride home. Once she's in the car, she asks him to come home with her, very clearly trying to seduce him, and he immediately agrees. He's like, "Oh, hell yeah, I'm going home with you right now." 10 seconds after hanging up the phone with his girlfriend. Nice job, dude. They get to her house and she says, "I can never go home again," and then disappears from the car. So at this point, we're like, okay, this is a ghost. She's clearly a ghost. She can just disappear. Ghost. He gets up to investigate and try to figure out where the hell she went. But as he's approaching the house, he's attacked by her. Freaks out, naturally, and runs back to the car and speeds off from the house. But as he's driving away, she pops back up in the back seat, and it scares him so bad that he veers off of the highway into a closed section of bridge, and once he's stuck on this bridge, she pops back up in the car, kills him. Splatter blood on the windows. First victim of the entire show is dead. After this, we cut back to Sam and Dean. They're gassing up the Impala, getting some snacks, getting ready to hit the road, and we get a little more insight into how Dean and John have been living and surviving while hunting together. Dean and John have been running credit card scams under fake names as a way to get money to pay for things like food. Sam is like, "What the hell, dude? That's not cool." And Dean is like, "Hey, we just put the names down. It's their fault. They send them to us." Obviously, this is a crime, and don't commit credit card fraud, but there's literally no other way for them to exist other than hustling pool and possibly bank robbery. So ultimately, it's just a very sad look into the life that Dean has been living since he was 4. They get back on the road, and Sam is going through Dean's cassette collection and makes fun of it. He calls it the greatest hits of mullet rock, which, fuck you, Sam. Me and Dean listen to the same music, and you're being rude. Dean tells Sam, driver picks the music, shotgun shuts his cake hole, and now we have that phrase on every bumper sticker in Hot Topic for the next 20 years. If you're listening to this show, you probably at one point owned a sticker or a t-shirt or a journal or a hat or something that said that phrase on it. I've seen people with little decals on the entrance to their car doors. This phrase is everywhere, and this is where it comes from. The very first episode of the show, 15 minutes in. Dean and Sam arrive at the scene of the death, and they pull out their fake federal marshal badges and they go talk to the cops. They are wearing street clothes, okay? They don't have their little FBI monkey suits at this point. They just have normal clothes and one single fake federal marshal badge, and they stroll up to the authorities and they're like, "Hey, can we get some information about the murder?" It's ridiculous. It would never work. And they even get called out "Aren't y'all a little young to be federal marshals?" Which, yeah, they're 26 and 22. I got a degree in criminal justice. There's no way at that age you're being a federal marshal. I know these things. Come on. This is the first time we see them impersonate the authorities to get information, and it will not be the last. In fact, they do this in almost every single episode, and there is almost never consequences. They leave the bridge, and they go back into town to talk to the girlfriend, Amy, of the victim, Troy. And they tell her, "Hey, we're Troy's uncles." And she's like, "I've never heard of you before. He's never mentioned you." And they're just like, "Oh, that sucks. Cool. I guess he didn't like us that much." But she gives them the information anyway, and apparently there's these rumors around town about a local legend about this girl who was murdered on Centennial, which is the strip of highway they're investigating, decades ago. And she still haunts it, she hitchhikes, and whoever picks her up will disappear forever, yada yada yada. Boom, we have our case for the week. We have the basis for our research that we need to do. Speaking of research, we get to the next section, which is the Sam being a nerd section, which is just Sam does all the research and Dean sits there and goes, "How did you even find this?" It makes no sense that Dean is like, "I don't get how you find all this stuff," when Dean's been hunting with his father for years now, but whatever. It's an excuse to make fun of Sam for being a nerd. Sam digs up that the woman in question who is haunting this bridge is named Constance Welch, and turns out she wasn't murdered. She killed herself. She jumped off the bridge because while she was bathing her kids, she stepped out for a moment and they both drowned. They drowned. And so she killed herself. Sam figures this out because angry spirits are born out of violent deaths. His words, not mine. And I would argue that being murdered is also a violent death. But Sam makes the leap to suicide. And, he's the genius here. He's the one who got the 174 in his LSAT, not me. So we're going to take his word for it. And then we get this random confrontation scene between Dean and Sam where Dean is like, how can you think you could ever lead a normal life, Sam? You have to face up to who you really are one of these days. Which on the surface reads as him just saying, like, you're a hunter, I'm a hunter, it's the family business, we're all hunters, you have to hunt, you're gonna come back one day. But this is also foreshadowing from a plotline that comes up later, and Sam is not exactly who he says he is, but that's to discuss later. Dean tells Sam in this scene that he has a responsibility to his family, and Sam says that he doesn't even remember his mother and that she's gone and not coming back. Of course, this sets Dean off because Dean is the biggest mama's boy on earth, and he tells Sam, hey, we do not talk about mom like that. They're having this entire fight in the Impala as they're sitting across the bridge where Constance is supposed to show up as a ghost and kill herself over and over again. Turns out, she does her thing. She shows up, jumps off, and they run after her to try and keep her from jumping, even though she's a ghost. Like, what are you even trying to stop her from doing? Like, are you gonna grab her? She's a ghost. You can't grab her. So they run after her, and they end up just, like, looking over the edge of the bridge at her. She's gone. She's a ghost. Of course she's gone. And as they're standing there, the Impala turns itself on and drives at them. And they both have to jump off the bridge to not get hit. It's just a funny scene where you're like, oh my god, look, Dean is covered in mud. Ha ha ha, because he had to jump off the bridge. It's there for no reason other than to be like, oh my god, this ghost can control cars? Crazy. We then see Sam and Dean going to check into a hotel under false names, and the hotel clerk tells them, hey, someone with the same last name as your fake credit card here got a room for a whole month. And we're clearly meant to know from this that it was John, because of course, John and Dean, being dumber than a box of fucking rocks, would use the same fake last names on their credit card scams. Jesus Christ, guys, some plausible deniability would probably be a good idea here. For whatever reason, the hotel clerk just lets them also take that room, so they go in and the walls are covered in information about the Centennial Highway victims, along with information about women in white, which is the kind of monster we're fighting this week, and various demons. This is the first mention of demons in the show, because the case this week isn't a demon, but this is supposed to tell us, hey, maybe the thing that killed their mom was a demon, and that's why John has so much information about them. The room is a fucking mess. There's, like, rotting food everywhere, there's paper thrown everywhere, it's in disarray, and they remark that it seems like he's been gone for a couple months at this point, which doesn't track with what the clerk of the hotel said. He said that he had a month rental, but whatever. They realized that John knew exactly what was going on the stretch of highway, that it was a woman in white, and that what he needed to do to get rid of her was to dig up the grave and burn the bone. A supernatural classic. They do this so many times over the course of this show. But clearly Constance is still hanging around, and they can't figure out why their dad was not able to go get the bones and burn them. Like, he's a pro. He's been doing this since their mom died, like 20 fucking years ago. What's he doing waiting around? Also, while they're in the hotel room, Sam tries to apologize to Dean for what he says about John and Mary, and then Dean just responds with, hey, no chick flick moments, which, okay, sure. This is a show for dudes. We have established the show is for dudes who love guns and women and live in middle America, so no chick flick moments. I'm sure that's the audience you're going to get. Can you note the sarcasm in my voice? And then we get the first exchange of jerk, bitch, which is another bumper sticker and keychain and t-shirt and journal and every possible piece of merchandising you can fit into a hot topic that we've seen in the last 20 years. I know some of you listening had matching jerk and bitch friendship bracelets. You can't lie to me. I know you had them. As they're about to leave the hotel, they realize the cops have been called by the hotel owner and Dean is arrested. So that was quick. Dean is arrested, he's pinned to the hood of the cop car, and he's confronted about impersonating a police officer, running credit card fraud, and the cop asks him, you got anything that's real? And Dean just responds, my boobs. Classic Dean. So Dean's been arrested, he's taken to the police station, and they are thinking this guy did the murders because we found him in a hotel room with walls covered in pictures of the victims and quote-unquote satanic mumbo-jumbo. The cop then pulls out John's journal. And this is the first time we see John Winchester's hunting journal. This journal is critical to at least the first 5 seasons of the show, if not more. It's something we see over and over and over again, and it's a point of reference for Sam and Dean when they're trying to figure out what exactly they're hunting. They sell a printed version of this journal now, and it's just a book. Like, it's not bound like a journal. It's just a hardback book, and it's honestly kind of disappointing. Anyway, the journal has coordinates in it, 35-111, and the cops want to know what these coordinates are, and Dean refuses to tell him because at this point, he kind of doesn't know. Like, he thinks he knows, but He just tells them it's his locker code from high school or something. While Dean is being held at the precinct, Sam goes and visits Constance's widower, and he says that John did come and visit him. And while John was there, he asked him where she was buried. So we find out that John did know where the bones were and perhaps did manage to burn them, but clearly it didn't work for whatever reason. The widower also insists that they had a happy marriage and she was the love of his life and that he never would have done anything to her. We get a bit of a lore dump in this scene, and we find out that women in white are women whose husbands cheat on them, so they go crazy and kill their children and then themselves. Of course, the widower insists that's not true, but because of Constance's current state as an angry spirit, a woman in white, we know that that's what happened. Back at the precinct, Dean uses a paperclip from John's journal to escape his handcuffs and bust out of the police station. And he calls Sam to tell him that Dad left Jericho. He knows this because he left his journal with coordinates in them. That's the 35-111. And he never goes anywhere without his journal. So him leaving his journal means that he's definitely in trouble and that he's trying to lead them to wherever 35-111 is on a map. While Sam is on the phone with Dean, he's driving the Impala and he almost crashes it because Constance shows up in the back of the car and demands that he take her home. The car starts driving on its own and Sam is locked in. He can't get out. He can't stop the car. He's doomed. They get back to her house and Constance attacks Sam. And he says to her, "You can't kill me because I've never been unfaithful. King, if you cheated on Jess ever, you would have been the dumbest man alive, so good for you." And then she says, "You will be," and forcefully kisses him. Welcome to the world of sexual assault and supernatural. It never fucking ends. She reaches into his chest because she's a ghost and she can do that, but she's stopped by Dean showing up and shooting her. Welcome to the world of very convenient timing for Dean to show up with a shotgun in Supernatural. This also happens a lot. Sam dramatically declares, "I'm taking you home," to Constance, and he crashes the Impala into the house, forcing Constance to go home. Since Constance is finally back in the house, she wanders around and she picks up a picture of her kids, and then she attacks Sam and Dean. She just keeps trying to kill them, but she stops because the ghosts of her two little kids show up and tell her, "You've come home to us, Mommy." They hug her. And by hugging her, they kill her, and she disintegrates into this pool of glowing blue stuff, which I could be remembering wrong. I don't think we ever see a ghost die like this ever again for the next 15 seasons. Like, I know that it's normal for things to look a little different in the pilot, but it really struck me that they just scrapped this way of killing a ghost for every other one of the 326 episodes after this one. It turns out that Constance couldn't go home because she was so afraid of facing her children that she drowned, but the only way her spirit was ever going to be set free was by confronting them, or I guess them confronting her. So the main case of the episode has been handled. Constance is dead. She's at peace. Whatever. So we can go into the setup for the next episode. They figure out where the coordinates are. It's Blackwater Ridge, Colorado. Dean tells Sam, "Hey, we can make it by morning." And Sam is like, "No, I need to go home for my law school interview with Stanford. Fuck you." So Dean takes him home. They get back to Sam's apartment and Sam says, "Hey, I can meet up with you later, but I have to do this interview." Like, he's willing to start hunting again with him for a little bit at least before he starts law school, but he has to at least do the interview. Dean is clearly upset that Sam's not coming with him immediately, and he tells them, "We made a hell of a team back there," which is true. Like, they work very well together when they're not fighting like little shitheads, but they're brothers, so what can you really expect? Dean lets Sam go as much as he didn't want to, and Sam goes back up into his apartment and tries to find his girlfriend, Jess, but he can't find her. But then he hears the shower running, so he's like, "Oh, she's just in the shower. It's fine. Whatever. I'm gonna go lay down." So he lays down in bed. He's waiting for his girlfriend to get out of the shower. He's excited to see her. But then, much like 22 years ago, some blood drops on Sam's forehead. He looks up, and he sees Jess is pinned to the ceiling, just like his mother was 22 years ago. Jess bursts into flames, just like his mother 22 years ago. And we're right back to where we started, with the most important woman in Sam's life bursting into flames above his bed. Obviously, this scene is meant to parallel what happened with Mary, and Dean busts into the apartment building, gets Sam out, and the fire department arrives, and they're devastated. Sam can't believe this is happening again. He has no memory of what happened to his mother when he was 6 months old, but he knows what happened, and he knows that what happened to his mother just happened to his girlfriend 22 years later. We then cut to the last scene of the episode. It's an iconic shot at this point. Camera is settled inside of the trunk of the Impala, and Sam and Dean are standing over the open trunk. Sam throws a gun into the trunk and says, "We got work to do." And then we cut to the credits. And that's it. That's the first episode of Supernatural. That is 101 pilot. I've probably watched this singular episode of TV 50 times, and that's probably underestimating it. I've watched this in reruns. I've started countless rewatches and gotten through just this episode or just the first season. This is probably the episode of TV that I have seen the most times out of literally any TV show. I think it's damn near a perfect pilot. I mean, if you're comparing it to something like Breaking Bad or any other prestige television that is being produced today, like Game of Thrones, it's shit. It's terrible. But for what it is, a CW show made in 2005 by the guy who made The Boys, it's perfect. It's a perfect introduction to why you're going to be obsessed with these characters, why you're going to be obsessed with this show, and why you're now trapped for the next 15 years. I get why after this episode aired, people were already on the forums losing their mind, being like, oh my god, this is my new favorite TV show. I get why in 2005, my mother turned on this show and became obsessed with it and then cursed me to be obsessed with it. Because back when TV used to air weekly, this was like prime time CW television, and everyone was hooked overnight. Like, you had this channel in basic cable. This was just what was available, and it was good. It was fun, and the two leads are hot. Now, before this episode ends, I do want to talk about something that's going to get into spoilers for later episodes of this season and of the show overall, but I find it so funny that I have to talk about it. There's a Tumblr post that's been going around recently from the user Alive Audience Gang that says Supernatural Season 1 is so funny. They made the main plotline finding Sam and Dean's missing father, but like, the guy's not missing, he's just avoiding them. Which, spoiler alert, is true. He's not missing. He's off fucking around and just trying not to be found by his kids, which is so shitty. It's terrible. I hate you, John Winchester. I hate you so much. And as you go through this podcast with me, you'll understand why. Because he's a terrible father. I mean, just from the exposition we get in episode 1, you should understand why this guy is the worst. He had his tiny children doing weapons training, making silver bullets, and not going to school, like, ever. Like, it was an awful childhood, and anyone with half a brain should hate John Winchester, just from what we're told about him in this episode, but trust me, it gets worse. With that, I'm gonna leave you. I could ramble about this episode for hours, but I don't think anyone would be listening by the time I got 5 minutes into that, so I'm just gonna leave it off here. I hope you enjoyed the first episode of Gaslight, Gatekeep, Gay Angel, and stay tuned next week for episode 2, When to Go.